pays to go in peace. That's the way we live.
Okay, guys, welcome back to the Grimerice show. This will be our 4th episode. And as promised, we've brought back Red Pill Junkie to have a chat with us and bring us up to date with some of the latest and greatest. But first, I'd like to introduce, as always, my co-host Graham. How are you doing, Graham?
Hey, I'm doing excellent. Looking forward to chatting with both you guys.
How's it going, Red? How you been the last couple weeks?
Hello, my friends. Hello to all our listeners all around the world, and hello to the NSA agent monitoring this conversation on Skype.
Yeah, at least we're happy to say we've got our recording gremlins worked out. Seems like everything's up and running again, so that's good to know. Maybe it was the Hadels after all.
The Hadels, the MIBs, who knows? Mr. Indrid Cold playing around with us.
So I read the red pills were great last week. I gotta say, Red, I really enjoyed them. Great work as always.
Thank you, sir.
Do you have anything new for us?
Well, no. We could really say that the mainstream news have definitely, been more important than the fortune news. You know, I started right now with a joke about the NSA, because the talk of the time right now is the shock of discovering that the United States government is gathering all this information from all the major internet service providers, Google, Microsoft, YouTube, Skype, which wasn't so much of a news to us, because we already knew that the United States government was building a really big, ginormous installation in Utah, which was intended to collect internet data. But now this is in everybody's minds. I think that it has finally clicked how enormous, how big, how prevalent this surveillance it really is.
Yeah, it's pretty fucked up. And didn't they say that they're recording phone conversations as well and storing them?
The Guardian broke the news that phone provider Ricin is giving to the United States all the metadata for all the calls of all their clients. I mean, the metadata is about who is calling who, where everybody is, and how long did the conversation take.
Yeah, it's interesting how the mainstream is starting to cover it. That's what I find fascinating, is that, along with a few things that have happened, controversies in the political establishment of the U.S. and the mainstream. It's starting to open up, or something's going on.
Yeah, exactly. Because back in the 1990s, there was talk among the parapolitical sites about something called Project Echelon. I don't know if you guys ever heard of it.
Oh yeah.
Project.
I'm not sure I have. I'd have to look in. The name sounds familiar for sure.
Well, I think they even made a TV movie about it.
Yeah, there was a movie about it. It was a good movie, actually.
I didn't see it, but what I do know about Project Echelon, well, it was a rumor back in the 90s that it was some super secret program that was intended to spy on all the electronic communications made all around the world. And I'm not talking just about internet emails. They were talking about even faxes and phone calls on landlines, and everything was being surveilled by this super secret project. But back in those days, it was only a conspiracy theory. It was Alex Jones stuff.
Yeah.
But now, with the news of this new Project Prism, it's finally mainstream news.
Yeah, and the storage capacity is something like, I heard something about a couple terabytes per second or per minute, or some ridiculous amount of capacity.
Yeah, I read an article on Wired about the facility on Utah. They were talking about yottabytes of information, and I don't even know what the hell a yottabyte is. But there must be quite a lot of Instagram pictures there.
What is
Yeah,
it?
no
A
doubt.
what? A lottabyte?
Yottabyte.
Yottabyte. Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay, which is probably like 1,000 terabytes or something like that.
No, I think it's a thousand petabytes.
Okay.
A
I mean,
lot of
that's
bite.
a kind of an insanely amount of information.
Did you say a lot of bite, Graham?
Yeah.
What do you?
A lot of
Is this a fucking James Cameron movie?
And with that kind of information that they have to parcel through, I mean, it opens to a speculation about what are the other things they must have already that we think it's only science fiction stuff. I mean, maybe they have already quantum computers capable of uh, checking all these data in a matter of, well, instantaneously. If it is quantum computers, maybe they have AI systems that are able to detect all these keywords that are being flagged. The terrorism, Obama, all those things that are being discussed right now in the mainstream.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, what we can really say with any certainty is that prison must be the tip of a very big iceberg.
Hopefully, all about to come crumbling down.
Well, doesn't look like it, because the most depressing thing about this is that all these systems were implemented back when George Bush was getting out of the presidency. But with President Obama, he has not only maintained those policies and those programs, but he has reinforced them. And he has come out to say that these programs are important because they have saved lives and they have averted terrorist attacks. But the moment you start to question about those terrorist attacks, they say, "Oh, we can't talk about it because it's classified information."
Yeah.
Okay, you just have to take our word for it. Oh, okay.
Seems like we're always expected to trust them. I'd like to hope that things aren't like that in Canada, but I'm sure there's a little bit of it.
Well,
Harper's right
sure.
on board, I'm sure.
Hmm.
Yeah, I
And
think
we
it's
also,
I think it's probably more worldwide in a way.
It is the
it
World
probably
Wide
is.
Web.
Yeah.
It probably is.
Yeah.
And we can also forget that this week finally started the trial against Bradley Manning. After 3 years of having him arrested and kept in prison in which apparently was inhuman conditions. But he finally is being taken to trial, and it seems that through the efforts of some NGOs, the transcript of this trial will be available to the public.
Yeah, I heard the Nobel Peace Prize petition for him is up to like 65,000 signatures or something like that.
Mm.
So I guess we'll see what happens. What exactly was he charged with again?
Treason. Treason and aiding, giving information to the enemy. Like, oh, come on. I mean, the guy gave information, all these leaked files to WikiLeaks. But the United States government is making the case that because of this, the information fell in the hands of Al Qaeda. So the guy there is a very slim possibility that the guy could be either spend the rest of his life on jail or maybe even executed for treason. I mean, he's being made a scapegoat. I mean, you look at him, his example, his trial, and you look at all the other things that we are seeing right now with all these information gathering by the NSA, and I mean, I think it's all related. It's all connected.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if the NSA was gathering information on the entire planet, but I wouldn't imagine they could ever let something like that get out because I'd imagine there'd be quite a few countries that would be fairly pissed off.
Yeah, there's an article on the CBC right now, actually, and it says the title is U.S. officials long denied massive data trawling, and it goes into exactly what you were talking about, Red.
Mm.
Yeah, so it's coming out.
There was also an interesting, kind of ironic blog post written by Anthony Bragala back in his website, the UFO Iconoclasts, that he was talking about the Navy spying on UFO websites.
Yeah,
Did you guys read it?
I heard about it. I think I heard about it on the Graylian.
I heard about it on the Graylian, yeah.
Yeah, I sent that news to Micah, maybe.
Yeah, that's right. He actually mentioned that.
And it's kind of an interesting thing because either you can look at it as something completely, innocuous, maybe some people working for the government that have a personal interest in UFOs and are using the war computers to look at those sites while they are on their lunch break or whatever, or maybe it is used as a kind of psyops. I don't know, trying to fuck with the minds of the ufologists, trying to incite some paranoia on them.
It could also be just that they want to know more information about what everybody is seeing, right? It's like a data collection, right? Instead of just being able to collect the data in secret through the Navy or the OSI or whatever, you can use all the data from the civilian agencies or civilian organizations to help, figure out what's going on.
Yeah, but the manner in which these guys are looking at these sites, I mean, it's so conspicuous. It's so easily traceable. I think it tells you something, because if they really wanted to keep it a secret, I'm sure they have capabilities to make those inspections completely untraceable.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So it's like they want to get caught.
I think they want to know that they want to let know to these people that they are being watched.
Yeah.
As a way to tell you, fucking with their minds. Greg Bishop talked about it back when he was writing his book Project Beta, that he felt that he was being spied, or that someone was tampering with his mail, and it's starting to really affect him. The paranoia was starting to get on him, but until he got fed up with it, fuck it, I have really nothing to hide. If they want to spy on me, go ahead. And that was it. That was the solution.
Yeah. Huh. It kind of reminds me of the movie that I saw last night that I'd like to talk to you guys about eventually.
What movie?
That was the one, The People versus the State of Illusion. The producer was from Calgary originally, so he did like the Canadian opening of it, and he talked afterwards about making the movie. It's quite a fascinating movie.
That was from the makers of What the Bleep Do We Know?
No, it wasn't from the makers of it. This guy did it on his own, but there was at least two of the scientists in What the Bleep were in this one. So Joe Dispenza and Candace Pert were both in this movie too. So it was kind of along the same lines. About how our perception, shapes our reality, right? And the kind of the science behind it, and how, our emotional memories color what we perceive, like even subconsciously, and how we build these walls around us and become addicted to emotions and other habits, and how we can change that through awareness and repetition and practice. So it kind of reminds me of like what you're saying about Greg Bishop. Like you can choose to perceive what's going on in a number of different ways, right? You can get stressed out about it and upset and paranoid about it, or you can just kind of accept it and change your perception about it. I mean, that's kind of not a very good example, but it was really a fascinating movie, and what was even better was the guy's talk afterwards, and he talked to us about a couple crazy stories that he had happen to him. I'd like to have him on, and actually his name's Austin Vickers. It would be great to interview him about it. Yeah, so no, it also talked about how we absorb all this info from around us, right? Like the billions of bits of information, and we only really perceive like 0.0001% of it or something like that. So it's just, how our perception built on past experiences or memories or whatever colors, like what 1.0001% we grab onto or whatever and perceive, right? So it was pretty cool, and it talked about how you can change it through awareness, right, or repetition and practice, and how things, how you can change your perception about things. So it was actually pretty fascinating.
But the problem with increasing your awareness is that you may be labeled crazy by the society.
Yeah.
No, imagine if you start seeing or hearing things that other people can't. They will think you are schizophrenic, and they will start pumping antipsychotic medicines to you.
Just shock the shit out of you.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think it's more of an awareness about just how your mind works, right? And the awareness of your process, not the content, but the process. And and so it makes sense to me. Like since I've been meditating more and stuff like that, I can tell where my mind goes with stuff. So I can tell that I'm just, my mind is going down this path. I can kind of watch it going down the path, and I know where it's coming from, right? So I can choose to stop thinking that way, or I can keep thinking that way if I want to. But I didn't used to have that awareness before.
Did you guys ever read Carlos Castaneda?
No, but that came up again. It keeps coming up, actually. I haven't.
I haven't read it either.
It's actually one of the reasons why I chose the name Red Pill Junkie back then. But anyway, the thing about Castaneda is he talks about a process called stopping the world, which is kind of like stopping that part of your mind, which is all the time talking, all the time trying to make sense of the world around you, trying to understand exactly. The moment you try to quiet that part of your mind and only exist in pure perception, taking it all in without trying to interpret it, it's the moment when you really can get access to altered states of consciousness.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And now there's the science behind it, right? Like now they can look at your brain and watch it fire and watch it, watch all these chemicals happen, these emotional chemicals happen in your brain. It's amazing. Exactly.
Yeah, they use MRIs with people who have taken, hallucinogenic drugs. And instead of seeing what they thought they would want to see, that, more regions of the brain firing up, they actually saw a decrease in brain activity, which would mean that the brain is, instead of making all these things, all these hallucinations, the brain is only more open to perception.
Yeah, I can't wait to talk to some people about some hallucinogenics. I haven't done some in a long time, but I've been thinking about trying some out again now that I've kind of evolved a little bit from my younger self.
I'll be the sober chaperone for you guys. You can gather some people together to do that, and I'll just stay, nice and clean and sober and watch you guys. I've had enough of that in my past that I don't need to play around with anything like that anymore.
Well, I've never taken none of all those hallucinogenic drugs. I've been tempted, to maybe try the ayahuasca experience, but I honestly don't think. I'm not sure my psyche is strong enough to endure that kind of psychic blow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to try it in my lifetime. I just don't know when or where yet. It'll probably be a lot of years down the road. But at some point, I'd like to try it out.
And I think if you're really going to do it, you have to do it properly. Like Graham Hancock discussed it with our friends Ben and Aaron on the Studios Universe. You have to try to look for the proper setting with people who really respect the experience, and you have to come with clean intentions.
Yeah.
You're only going to take it for shits and giggles. Man, you're really looking for a bad experience.
Yeah, I agree. Has to be reverence for it.
You have to
Yeah,
rent.
exactly.
You have to. It's like I don't. It's like trying to run the New York Marathon, and you can't even run your street block. Then,
Yeah.
man, what are you looking for? A heart attack?
Yeah.
I can run around the block. I think. I don't know. I think I can. During hockey season, maybe I can. Maybe not.
Yeah, I don't know. Life is just too damn good right now. There's too much to live for me. I don't want to play around with anything like that. I just want to be aware and enjoy this life for all there is to offer right now. I mean, this is the best time to be alive in humanity's history. So I want to be like fully present for it.
That's debatable. How was your bike ride home yesterday? Actually, I meant to ask.
It's a little wet.
I bet.
Yeah, but actually it was dry after like about 5 minutes of downpouring rain. It was dry and sunny the whole way. So
Did the hail hit you?
a little bit.
Yeah, I was looking out the window, it was hail, and I was fucking howling.
Yeah, I was fully present for that ride.
Jesus. The other important news that was discussed on the Fortune blogosphere was the Bilderberg reunion.
Right.
Now I think they want to change their image because they made the list of attendees public. The one name that caught my attention was the former chief of the CIA, the General Petraeus. That was interesting. Saying, I wonder what he's going to do there.
Are they? I don't think they're still going to tell us what they talk about in those meetings, though, are they?
No, of course not. But obviously, you have to know that everything they discussed is all in our best interests, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah, I'd imagine. It looks like now more and more of the electronics and internet companies are starting to weasel their way in there as well.
Yeah, for sure. The CEO of Google is going to attend, I think, for the second time.
Yeah, and Amazon. I think Amazon's got representation there this year as well.
Yeah, Jeff Bezos is attending too.
So it'd be nice to know what they're talking about.
Well, probably some of the things that we have already discussed. These massive programs to gather data.
How much of a tax break you get if you comply.
Exactly.
So, was there anyone else notable on the list?
What else? Well, there was some discussion about the oldest primate ever found in China, which is, according to the archaeologists, 55 million years old. And this primate is not exactly part of the line that eventually evolved into humans. So but nevertheless, it was important because it pushes back the evolution of primates to even earlier times, right?
Yeah, to just after the dinosaurs, really, right?
Exactly. So
was it that far?
Well, the dinosaurs were what, 65 million, and
yeah, the fact the dinosaur 65 million years ago with the crushing of the meteorite in Yucatan, and then 10 million years.
Shit.
Exactly, and 10 million years ago, you have this little primate that was no bigger than a rat, already making the way into the world.
Huh.
So the thing I find interesting is if we can push back the evolution of the primate line and the human genus, maybe it could give the case to all these ideas about even older civilizations that were wiped out even before, the traditional ones in Egypt and Mesopotamia. All the things that Graham Hancock discusses with his books, Fingerprints of the Gods.
Yeah.
Nobody talks about civilizations that were maybe millions of years old, because that's ludicrous from our current scientific paradigm.
Possibly even not quite human civilizations once upon a time.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe there was some dominant species on this planet who achieved uh, uh, technological civilization. Then we enter the fuzzy realm of all these discussions about the reptilians and all that stuff.
Scotty Roberts territory.
Exactly.
Yeah, he's coming on at the end of June, so we'll have to ask him about that.
Yeah, it will be interesting.
Just we keep discovering more and more stuff about our past.
Yeah, and there's going to be for every one thing we discover, there's 10 or 100 who will never see the light day. Who is going to be lost forever.
Yeah.
It would seem after about 10,000 years, everything's gone.
Yeah, exactly. I like this TV program After Man. I think it's the title, which shows how frail our modern cities really are. If they are not constantly being attended to, they will crumble in a matter of years.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine that. It's hard for me to imagine that. It feels like our cities are like indestructible in some ways.
Yeah, we really are with the idea that our civilization is going to last forever, but we really don't have any guarantees about that.
No.
No, definitely not.
It's like a child who never considers its own mortality.
Yeah.
But we really need to...
And it's kind of funny because that's kind of like a new problem. You know what I mean? Like even 100 or 200 years ago, things were a lot different. People were, life was a lot harder. You could be prepared for a lot more.
Yeah.
Even 100 years ago. If like the power shut off and the water shut off, most people would have probably been okay because they had been living large portions of their lives without power and water anyway.
Yeah. You will have some backup system, as it were.
Exactly. Like a city 150 years ago, if a city got hit by a solar flare or something like that, they wouldn't even know. They wouldn't even care. Nowadays, it could throw the entire globe into total anarchy.
It's an interesting paradox because the more advanced we become, the more...
vulnerable.
Vulnerable, exactly. We become, too.
Yeah. I was just thinking today when we were having those problems because I couldn't hear you guys anymore, so I reached for my phone and I was trying to text and I was trying to use the notes. I thought, well, what if I lost all these connections? I'd feel like on this little island all on my own.
Yeah, it's so weird how easily we become dependent to all these technologies, right?
Yeah.
To the hive. You're addicted to the hive, Graham.
Yeah.
Me too. It's okay.
Which reminds me of another interesting news that I read about just last night about this actress of this TV series Walking Dead, who has been arrested by the FBI for allegedly sending letters laced with ricin to President Obama.
What?
Yes.
I haven't heard of that.
Did you guys read about that?
No.
I heard something about it, but what was it laced with?
Ricin.
Ricin. Sorry.
Right. Yeah.
Huh. Or resin. I don't know what it's called, but yeah, it's dangerous for sure. Huh. So she's gonna get probably hung.
I don't know. Maybe she could allege to have mental problems. There we go back to the idea about how society labels dissonant behavior. But the thing that I found ironic is how The Walking Dead is about the crumbling of society, crumbling of the structures of authority. And now this actress, he tried to apparently attack the major figure of authority in the world, President of the United States.
Is she just really trying to play her role or something?
I don't know. I haven't read much about it. I think Lauren Coleman is covering the story on his blog, Twilight Language.
I wonder what Stanley Krippner would have to say about something like that. I don't know, people almost like snapping. Like you'd think she had it pretty good.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, successful and rich. Why why is she doing that? She has destroyed not only her career but her entire life and the life of her family.
Yeah, that's crazy. I wonder what the conspiracy theorists will say about that too. Some sort of
a false flag attack.
Yeah. That's what Alex Jones is saying, I'm sure.
Yeah, Manchurian candidate.
Exactly.
So yeah, I wonder what Stanley Krippner thinks about how connected our society is. Like, it reminds me of in Micah's book, The UFO Singularity, how they talked about the similarities between our World Wide Web and the Eastern philosophy of connected consciousness.
Yes, like maybe we're making some type of electronic prosthetic for something we might have had in a more natural way a long time ago.
Because Stanley Krippner's been around for a while. I think
he would have had an interesting life for sure, because he's been around since, like, I want to say like the 40s, 50s.
He was born in 32.
Yeah, so he was rocking, back in the day. He's seen a lot of things happen.
Smoking grass with the Grateful Dead.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. I'm halfway through his book, Rolling Thunder. There, it's pretty good.
Yeah,
he talks about some of those days.
Yeah, yeah, it's been a pretty fascinating book. I'm really enjoying it too. I just finished the Sweat Lodge part and the Shamanic dreaming, which I'm just fascinated by. So I'm going to a Sweat Lodge tomorrow actually. So that's kind of appropriate. I think 2 days before we interview Stanley Krippner. So that should be interesting.
Yeah, you're going to Sweat Lodge tomorrow, aren't you?
Yep.
Oof. Have you been to one before?
Yeah, it's great.
Sweat it out, buddy.
Betcha, I'm gonna sweat it all out tomorrow.
We have some of those here in Mexico too. Well, the traditional ones are called temazcales, and they're like, I don't know, like earthen igloos with only one hole in the ceiling, and people get inside and take all the clothes off, and they put on the water on hot coals, and it's a religious ceremony.
Yeah,
it is in the native culture too. Yeah, or in Canadian native culture too.
Mm.
So
I once had a very interesting experience in a sauna. I wrote about it in my blog. I call it my Mothman moment. I don't know if you guys ever read it.
No, tell us about it.
Well, it was back, I think in 2009, when John Keel passed away. I think 2009 or 2010, I can't remember. Well, anyway, everybody was talking about him, paying respects to him, writing a lot of eulogies, and obviously, if you talk about John Keel, you have to talk about the Mothman and his book, The Mothman Prophecies.
Yeah.
And from what I was thinking about all this in a sauna in a sports club. I was a member back in those days. I was all alone, and you know how these saunas operate. They have, I don't know, a timer that will every 2 minutes or so, a stream of vapor will come out, to keep the temperature.
Yeah.
But and those steam discharges will only last like 30 seconds or so. But when I was thinking about John Keel, the steam discharge started, and instead of lasting only 30 seconds, it went on and on. And at first I told myself, okay, I can endure this. I'm used to hot temperatures. I kind of like hot temperatures. I can man this up. But eventually the goddamn thing kept going, and my skin felt like it was on fire. My ears hurt, and I really got scared. I thought, man, I gotta get out of here, or maybe I'm going to suffer a heart attack. And the moment I stood up, and you start to move in an environment full of hot steam. Everything hurts.
Yeah, yeah.
The moment I touched the handle of the door, that's the moment the steam stopped.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that was what the hell.
Yeah, I think actually in Krippner's book he was saying that that he had the same sensation of his skin being on fire.
Yeah, it's like exactly what he described.
And he said he decided that he just had to embrace it, and he breathed it in and he accepted the fire.
Yeah, well, I don't know. This could, obviously, a skeptic would hear this kind of talk and will dismiss it as all a coincidence. But I can't help thinking that there was some trickterish aspect to all this. There was someone there teasing me or testing me. Seeing if I can. I obviously failed the test.
No, maybe you passed. Yeah.
But it was interesting.
Yeah, that's very creepy.
Well, on that note, I suppose we might as well get to our interview with Stanley Krippner. He's a Ph.D. Psychologist. So we'll catch you next time, Red and Graham. And I hope you guys enjoy the interview with Krippner. And we're here for our interview with Stanley Krippner, as promised. With me, as always, is Graham. How's it going, Graham?
Hey, I'm doing excellent. I'm really excited here to talk to Stanley.
Okay, well, one thing, let me say first, the book, thanks a lot for the book, Stanley, Rolling Thunder. I really, really enjoyed it. I'm of native descent myself, so it was a really good read. It was really eye-opening even for me.
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
So one question about the book I had was how much did Rolling Thunder talk to you about the meaning of the seven-pointed purple star?
Well, of course, the 7 points were sort of his logo. He had the 7 points on his turban, which he wore on very formal occasions, and he used it from time to time in his ceremonies and around the house. And to him, it was representation of the 7 sisters, the Pleiades, as Western astronomers call them, which have a whole interesting history, not only to the Greeks, but, there's a tribe in Africa who claims that they were star people, that their ancestors actually came from the Pleiades. And they had a map of the Pleiades way before Europeans came into contact with them. And those maps, as far as I know, have been pretty well verified as being ancient maps, and they do pretty well correspond to the position of the Pleiades, which means that they either had sharp eyes or they had very good intuitive skills. So there's much more to the Pleiades than that, but that gives you some overview and gives your listeners some overview as to the Pleiades and how Rolling Thunder connected with the 7 points.
So in your mind, did Rolling Thunder believe that perhaps the ancestors came from there, or that did they look more as the spirit world was there?
More that the spirit world was there. Now, of course, this African tribe has a legend that the ancestors really came from there, and we can sort of stretch a point and see that we're all stardust because we're made out of the same stuff, basically, that stars were made out of. We all go back to the Big Bang. And all energy and matter and spirit actually comes from that Big Bang trillions of years ago. So I look at a lot of these statements metaphorically. But let's get back to Rolling Thunder, as we discuss in our book, The Voice of Rolling Thunder. And, of course, he believed in the spirit world, and to him, the spirit world was not so different than the ordinary world, because we're interacting with the spirit world all of the time. Our ancestors are with us, the spirits are with us, our past lives are with us, and to him, you know, everything was made out of one piece. And it's just the Western thought that either denies the spirit world or separates the spirit world from the ordinary world and sets up these false distinctions, which isn't really part of Native American way of looking at things, where body, mind, and spirit are all interconnected.
Yeah, the natives, they more looked at it as being one with the earth, and that you know, sickness in the earth would be related as sickness in humans.
Absolutely, and Rolling Thunder made a big point of that. We've got to clean up our act personally. We've got to clean up our act ecologically, and our survival depends upon that. Now, a lot of Native American healing emphasizes balance, emphasizes wholeness, equilibrium. And when a person gets sick or when a planet gets sick, it's out of balance. And of course, there was this marvelous film some years ago, Kiwanaswatsi, which is a Native American tribal world, meaning world out of balance. And the film shows how messed up this poor world of ours is, with all of the global warming, the desertification, the pollution of the air, the pollution of the oceans, and the warring factions on the earth. This is really an earth out of balance. And Rolling Thunder devoted his life to trying to get some balance back into the earth so that people could be at one with nature and a part of nature and not kill each other off, kill nature off, and go on the rampage that's been so ruinous to the human species.
Now, you were with him through a lot of that, right? You knew him for quite many years.
Oh, good heavens, yes. I knew him for a couple of decades, as a matter of fact. And so I was with him during the thick of some of this.
Now, I was interested in the story about how Rolling Thunder kind of came into his power. And I actually thought there almost seems to be a correlation between that story and some of the more modern stories of like, let's say, contactees or abductees who end up having these experiences, and then they end up getting into energy healing or different types of spirituality. Have you ever thought about that at all?
Well, yes, this is actually a very common theme with healers today. And it's not so much of a common theme with Western physicians, although it is more so with Western psychotherapists. A number of Western psychotherapists go through some sort of mental illness themselves or have mental illness in the family, and this gets them interested in becoming psychotherapists and helping other people. Every once in a while, we do have a physician who went through an illness or had illness in the family, and this is what triggered their interest in becoming a doctor or a chiropractor or a naturopath or a nurse or whatever. Mm-hmm. But you see this to the extreme with indigenous healers and shamans and medicine people. Very often they have a tragic event in their life, as Rolling Thunder did, or some spontaneous healing of a person who needed help, or a call from the ancestors in a dream or in a vision. Very, very dramatic ways of being called to heal.
So the one thing I also wanted to ask you about before I forget is you've been into the Dream Lab work. You had all these studies going on way back. So did you ever follow the work of like Russell Targ or Hal Puthoff, or even like Robert Monroe at the Monroe Institute?
Oh, of course, I knew all of those people. I still know Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff. I read them frequently. And I was actually one of the first people who Robert Monroe told about his out-of-body experience.
Really?
And I took him seriously. He had been to University of California, Los Angeles, as a guest of a friend of his in the psychiatry department, and he was telling the people in the psychiatry department about his out-of-body experiences, and they listened politely in silence, and after he was finished, he said, well, now, gentlemen, there were no women in the group in those days. Well, gentlemen, what do you think of these stories? And there was dead silence, and then finally one of the psychiatrists spoke and said, well, Mr. Monroe, to be very frank with you, we all think that you're schizophrenic. Well, now they wouldn't get away with that because we studied out-of-body experiences. We know that many people have these experiences, and almost none of these people are schizophrenic. And when they are schizophrenic, they have very, very bizarre out-of-body experiences, what we call depersonalization. And for the most part, these are experiences that they can learn something from, and they can be very illuminative and illustrious. Rolling Thunder, of course, had a lot of out-of-body experiences, and he did this at will whenever he wanted to travel to some part of the earth, or whenever he wanted to go into the spirit world, or whenever he wanted to check on somebody that was ailing, that was at quite a distance.
Yeah, but they didn't. He had a different. How did he describe it? As like we'd call it today an NDE or astral travel. What did Rolling Thunder consider it?
He called it journeying.
Yeah, I enjoyed the story in the book about where the girl Midge had the car accident.
That was such a sad story because these two women were in the car and they went off the road. Their car simply went out of control. The brakes didn't work, and they were on treacherous highways in California. And one of the girls was killed immediately, and the other one ended up in the hospital, and she was in a coma. And one of the nurses said, I want to bring in Rolling Thunder because none of the things the doctors here have done has helped bring her out of the coma. So Rolling Thunder came in, and he immediately spotted this is a case of a lost soul. And he sat down, closed his eyes, and he took a journey off to the site of the accident. And as he tells the story, there she was. There her soul was sitting on a rock. And he said, you have to come back with me and join your body. And she said, oh, no, I'm waiting for my friend. I promised my friend that I would wait here for her. And Rolling Thunder said, no, your friend is with the Great Spirit, but your time has not yet come. You've got to come back to your body. Oh, no, I'm going to be here waiting for my friend. Then Rolling Thunder called upon his friend, the North Wind, and the North Wind blew her soul back right into her body, and she opened her eyes. The nurses got very, very excited. They called in the doctor, and the doctor said, get that old Indian out of here. He fell asleep. He's no help whatsoever. Well, it was just as good that they sent Rolling Thunder out because the woman told a story without Rolling Thunder being in the room, and her story was very similar to his.
Oh.
She said, my friend was floating up into the sky, and I said, please come back, and my friend said, no, I will not be seeing you on this earth anymore. I'll see you in the next world. And she said, no, I'm going to sit on this rock until you come back. And she said, I sat on this rock for such a long time, and then I felt this wind, and I couldn't hang on to the rock, and this wind just blew me away, and here I am. I'm in this strange hospital room. I'm back in my body. So here we have a story that now is verified by the experiencer herself, same thing more or less than what Rolling Thunder told us.
That's fascinating. It reminds me, as we were just speaking about the Monroe Institute, how they have a program there. I think it's called like once you get up to the upper levels, it's called Soul Rescue or something like that. Very similar to how RT does it.
Yes, they do. They have their Soul Rescue program, and of course, it's based upon the Soul Retrieval program.
Oh, right.
That not only the RT did, but many shamans from different traditions around the world do something like that. And Michael Harner's shamanic counseling training involves a whole course on soul retrieval, and one of his students, Sandra Ingerman, has written a very, very good book about it. And of course, Western psychiatry doesn't take soul retrieval seriously, but the shamans and the medicine people have been doing this for years. And Fawn Journeyhawk is another Native American healer who I know, and for decades she's been helping veterans of all of the wars the United States has been in, Vietnam and Iraq and Afghanistan, who have post-traumatic stress disorder, go back to the place where they had this horrible accident or catastrophe or murder or killing and find their soul, and then they bring their soul back to the body, and then this helps them to recover from their disorder. And again, this is not approved by Western psychiatry, but you know it works. And as Rolling Thunder said, if anything works, I'm going to use it.
Yeah, that's one thing. No, sorry, that's one thing shamans or shamans are famous for, is their willingness to open up to new things and try whatever's willing to work.
Yes, shamanism is very open-ended, and they are not doctrinaire. Shamanism, of course, is not a religion. Religions tend to be very closed-minded and closed-ended, but shamanism is a spiritual practice. And being a spiritual practice, they can pull in from any tradition that they want, as long as it's in service of the greater good and in service of the people that they're trying to help.
I also like the correlation between Rolling Thunder, his dream work, and what the shamanism, consider, what is it called, dream work, and then comparing that to some of like Stephen LaBerge's work in lucid dreaming, or being able to obtain lucidity in order to heal things. Or do you see any correlations there? Or have you ever tried like lucid dreaming yourself?
Well, I have spontaneous lucid dreaming experiences once in a while, but the thing that most people don't realize is that shamans from around, or shamans, either pronunciation is correct, shamans from around the world often engage in what we would call lucid dreaming. And
Right.
they've done this for the millennia. They've done this for probably tens of thousands of years. And Charles Laughlin is a friend of mine. He's written a whole book about shamanic dream work and about how shamans did lucid dreaming in a variety of societies. His book, Communing with the Gods, is just an excellent description of this. We often connect lucid dreaming with the Tibetan traditions, the dreaming in the clear light. And that is a very venerable tradition that also goes back. But that's in turn derived from Bon shamanism in Tibet and parts of what is today is China. So, some people say there's nothing new under the sun. And lucid dreaming is something that was a big breakthrough in dream research. And a lot of dream scientists didn't believe it. They thought these people were lying.
Right.
And then Stephen LaBerge, as you noted before, he actually hooked people up to an electroencephalograph machine, said, okay, when you start to have a lucid dream, you move your eyes in a square, and that will show up on the tracings. And they did. And the tracings showed that they were still asleep, but their eyes were moving not up and down as they ordinarily move during a dream, but they were moving in a square shape. So there we had some definite evidence that lucid dreaming actually existed, and that people were wide awake while they were completely asleep.
Fascinating. And you did some dream studies based on, you had somebody sleeping for 6 nights during Grateful Dead concerts, and you showed images on the screens and tried to do some research that way?
Yes, that was just one small part of our research. We actually had 200 nights in our studies. And that's been published actually in 100 different articles and 3 books. And people can go to the website and look that up. They can go to Amazon.com and order our book, Dream Telepathy. But the Grateful Dead study was only for 6 nights, and yet that's gotten more publicity than any of the other longer experiments we did. And Jerry Garcia suggested that. He said, we're going to be doing a program at Port Chester, New York, at the Capitol Theater, and maybe we can do a telepathy study at the same time. So, sure enough, the people at the Port Chester Theater were enjoying the concert, and all of a sudden there was a sign on the screen, "You are about to take part in a telepathy experiment." A man by the name of Malcolm Besant is asleep at the Maimonides Dream Laboratory in Brooklyn. You are going to see a picture. Try to send this picture to him by telepathy. And at that moment, our research volunteer flipped a coin, and heads meant one picture, tails meant another picture, and then he put the picture into the slide projector that flashed on the screen, and then the Grateful Dead talked about the picture, the colors in the picture, the activities in the picture, while Malcolm Besant, who was an English psychic in our laboratory, was dreaming. And then we had neutral outside observers try to match the pictures with the dreams after everything was over, and they were able to do so with accuracy that was far above what you'd expect by chance. Now, you probably know that there's a Grateful Dead archive in University of Santa Cruz, California library, and they will eventually have 22 rooms devoted to the Grateful Dead experience, and one of those rooms will have some artifacts from that Grateful Dead experiment, with the actual pictures that were being used and the article that we wrote up about it, and some eyewitness accounts of people who were there. There's a Grateful Dead cover band, by the way, that's going to be playing in that same theater next year, and they're going to try to do a small version of that dream telepathy experiment.
Oh, really? That's amazing. Are you going to be a part of it, or?
Oh, yes, and I can't say any more about it than that until we get everything settled, but, you know, it'll be interesting to sort of revisit that whole project again.
Yeah, no doubt. Because, well, the Grateful Dead were really close friends with, turned out to be, or ended up being close friends with Rolling Thunder in the end.
Oh, yeah, well, they certainly were, and this, of course, is how I met Rolling Thunder. I met him through Mickey Hart, because every time I saw Mickey Hart, he would say, "You've got to meet Rolling Thunder sometime. You got to meet Rolling Thunder sometime." I said, "Fine, I'm open to it." And I only visit California once or twice a year, so you've got to figure out the timing. So this is when I was working on dreams in the Maimonides Dream Laboratory in Brooklyn, New York. So one time I flew to San Francisco, and when I came to San Francisco, I would stay at Mickey Hart's ranch, which at that time was in Novato, California, and he had sent a private plane to pick up Rolling Thunder, so we finally met.
And how was, what were your impressions when you first met him?
Well, I was at a Grateful Dead concert, and during the intermission, I saw this striking Native American man with beads and Native American feathers walking down the aisle with a beautiful woman on either arm, and I thought, this must be Rolling Thunder. So I walked up and I said, "You must be Rolling Thunder." He said, "You must be Dr. Krippner." And that was the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
Yeah, spawning a couple of decades.
You bet, absolutely.
And now you're still close friends with his grandson?
Yes, I'll be seeing his grandson again in just a few days. We have ongoing projects, and now, of course, we're trying to give publicity to our book, The Voice of Rolling Thunder. And Rolling Thunder's grandson, Sidian Morning Star, is a very, very talented web designer, and he's a computer whiz. And he's working for a company in Boise and is sort of doing something with computers and book design that hasn't been done before. It's very, very ingenious. So he's sort of carrying on the shamanic tradition electronically, you might say.
So we heard your a couple of your discussions with Christopher Ryan on his Tangentially Speaking podcast. Great discussions, and you guys have traveled all over the world. And I'm just curious, like, you've got all this experience, all these fascinating things you guys have been, researching and discovering, and yet you're more popular and pretty much everywhere else in the world, compared to your popularity in North America. I mean, do you attribute anything in our culture to that at all? Like, what does that mean anything to you?
Well, I think you have something there, because the topic of shamanism and Native American healing, I have found, is actually better known and more popular in Western Europe than it is in the United States. I went with Rolling Thunder to Western Europe, and we did some programs together, and he had much larger crowds in Europe than he did in the United States. And when I speak about shamanism in Europe and about Native American healing, again, I get much larger turnouts, much larger audiences than in the United States. And I hope... Well, no, I was going to say that Rolling Thunder was very much at home in places like Denmark, Sweden, and Germany, and Austria, and was very, very well received. And people really listened to him very, very carefully, because they thought, this is our chance to learn about Native American traditions, Native American healing, and also see what we can do to help out Native Americans who are being oppressed, because there's so much poverty among Native American tribes in the United States. Now I'm happy to say things are better, thanks to Rolling Thunder, thanks to the American Indian movement, thanks to a lot of self-help groups on the reservations, and also thanks to some of the practices that Rolling Thunder put a stop to. Back when Rolling Thunder was active, it was not uncommon for social workers to take a Native American baby and give it to a white group of parents who didn't have any children, thinking that the child would be better off. And then the child grew up not knowing anything about his Native American tradition. And also, Rolling Thunder, back when I first knew him, was trying to protect the pinon trees, the pine nut trees. They were a source of food and protein for Native Americans. And he noted that, if this was against the law, of course, but bulldozers would come in and tear up the trees so that land could be used for grazing land for cattle. And he protested, and finally he and his group put sand in the engines of the tractors, and so the tractors wouldn't run the next morning. Well, both those practices are now stopped, and you will never guess who stopped them. What president of the United States put an end to this? One of the best friends that Native Americans ever had was Richard Nixon. And Nixon, despite all of his flaws and foibles and actual sins, was very, very helpful to Native Americans, because one of his coaches in high school was Native American. And he said he learned a lot of leadership from that Native American coach. Didn't learn enough, but he learned something, and at least he learned enough to be a good friend of Native Americans, and he became president. But also, I'm a member of the Smithsonian Institution's Museum of the American Indian, and they recently had an entire article devoted to how Richard Nixon was such a good friend of Native Americans.
So
also, there's sort of a funny story while we're talking about Nixon. Rock Scully was one of the road managers of the Grateful Dead, and he was going to prison, not for anything that he had done wrong, but he refused to help the government prosecute a marijuana dealer who was a friend of his, and so they put him in jail because he was not cooperating. And so Rolling Thunder was called upon to do a goodbye ceremony for Rock Scully, and I was there at the time, and so Rolling Thunder smudged us all with the ceremony, and then he made a prediction. He says, Rock, you're going to have an experience in jail that you will never have in the ordinary world. And sure enough, Rock Scully went to jail, and who should be in this cell right next to him but H.R. Haldeman, Nixon's chief of staff, who had been put in prison because of the illegal activities that he participated in when Nixon was president. And the two of them actually became friends, and Haldeman was the only one of Nixon's staff who admitted that he had done something wrong. He wrote about this in his autobiography, and I think that maybe his contact with Rock Scully humanized him a little bit, because his kids were very thrilled and excited to find out that their father was now a friend of the road manager of the Grateful Dead.
Yeah. So speaking of our North American culture there compared to the rest of the world, do you think it's going to open up at all, or do you think it has been opening up?
It certainly is opened up to Native Americans. There's much more of a visibility now of Native Americans. And as I said before, the Smithsonian Institution's Museum of the American Indian in Washington, D.C., and its branch in New York City are bringing in, good heavens, hundreds of thousands of people a year. Their museum is very accurate. Their exhibits are constantly changing, and people are learning a lot from that museum, from its publications. But also they're learning a lot from Native Americans who are giving lectures, who are sharing their knowledge, and who are taking people on tours of their reservations, and who are contributing to American culture in many different ways.
So what about more of opening up in a parapsychological type of way, or opening up to more of this duality of consciousness and this type of thing?
Well, it's good news and it's bad news. First of all, the bad news is parapsychology is not getting much money, not getting much funding. So people are not opening up their pocketbooks to support parapsychology. But it's opening up in that more people are reporting parapsychological experiences, and one is finding more articles about parapsychology in magazines, and even associated topics, especially in the field of physics magazines and biological magazines, because many of the descriptions are right out of the pages parapsychology. Like when you read the biological magazines about cells that are separated at a distance and they're still mirroring each other in terms of their behavior, although there's no physical way they could be in contact.
Mm-hmm.
And in quantum physics, you have, again, groups of subatomic particles that are separated, and yet it seems as if they're still in contact with each other. So a lot is going on that doesn't call itself parapsychology, but certainly is part of the new emerging paradigm that there's a much closer connection between atoms, between cells, between people, between other organisms and people than we've suspected.
Yeah, and it seems like that those connections aren't bound by the laws of physics as we know them either.
Yeah, not by the laws of physics we knew today, but I think it's only a matter of time that the laws of physics will expand and will have a lot to teach us about what we call embeddedness, and about what David Bohm called the implicate order, the underlying order that unifies things, which is beneath the explicit order, a term he used to describe the surface order where things seem to be separate and distinct from each other. But, Native Americans knew about this unity thousands of years ago, and a quantum physicist by the name of David Peat wrote an entire book called Blackfoot Physics, talking about how the philosophy of the Blackfoot Indians is very, very similar to the postulates of quantum physics. And we've got a lot of that in our book, The Voice of Rolling Thunder, because Sidian Morning Star has been reading quantum physics since he was a kid. And so he has, of course, early on grasped the similarities between quantum physics and what Native Americans had been talking about for thousands of years.
So, Stanley, you seem to be able to walk this middle ground better than most, I would say, after listening to you for a while now, about being like a healthy skeptic, yet also being very open-minded and non-judgmental about all kinds of phenomena. Like, do you ever get sick of having to to prove things to our, kind of dogmatic scientific community?
No, because I don't think that anything in this field can be proved. First of all, nothing in science can be proved. Science is always open-ended and open-minded. Proof is a word that I don't even use. You can say something is demonstrated, something is repeated, something is verified, but I tell my students, don't use the word proof unless you're talking about logic, mathematics, or whiskey.
That's a good point. So do you ever get sick of trying to demonstrate something then?
If the challenge comes from somebody who is well informed and asks a sensible question, no, I don't. I enjoy the repartee. Right.
Okay. Sometimes I struggle with that myself, like feeling like I've listened to some of the skeptical podcasts and this and that, and I got a little bit disenfranchised with the whole thing after the name calling and kind of just making fun of people who have seen UFOs or this and that, and I've seen some things myself, and sometimes I feel like if I'm too skeptical, it kind of holds me back in a way. I don't know if that's something to do with some sort of placebo effect or something like that, but I'm almost I almost feel like it's going to become easier just to open right up.
Well, this name calling and ridicule is really not part of the scientific method.
Right.
And so people who engage in that are really undermining science, and they're really deviating from the true scientific path, which of course has to be open-minded and has to exhibit a willingness to try things out, to test things, and then if they're verified, fine. If they're not verified, fine. But either way, we've added a little bit to human knowledge.
Yeah.
Rolling Thunder, by the way, was very cautious about matters like this. People knew that if they took his photograph without his permission, very often the photograph simply would not turn out. But he would not accept the challenge. He would just let things flow in their ordinary way. And one year he was visited by a very well-known photographer who wanted desperately to take Rolling Thunder's photo, but he knew he wouldn't do it without Rolling Thunder's permission. And he also had a life-threatening disease, which is the main reason he came to see Rolling Thunder. So Rolling Thunder worked with him for 3 months, and the life-threatening disease, the blood infection, completely disappeared. And so the photographer was just about ready to leave the camp, and a young man brought in from off the road a paper sack, and the paper sack was a young eagle. And the eagle was squawking and yelling and screaming, and he said, Rolling Thunder, what do I do with this eagle? And Rolling Thunder said, give him to me. And Rolling Thunder took the sack, and immediately the eagle quieted down. Rolling Thunder took the eagle out of the paper sack, held the eagle, and the eagle was very compliant, very quiet. And then he said to my photographer friend, now you can take your picture. So he took the picture of Rolling Thunder and the eagle, and that picture ended up on the cover of our book.
Oh, that's the one. Okay, that's a great picture.
And then the eagle flew away. The eagle had been healed, and off it went, back to the nest.
Wow. It reminds me of that story of him in the book, The Voice of Rolling Thunder again, how he was running through the forest howling with the coyotes and actually addressing the coyotes there face to face and talking to them. Was it coyotes or was it
coyotes?
Coyotes. This experience, I actually was with him myself. So in this case, I can speak from direct experience. I visited Rolling Thunder several times in Nevada, of course, and on one time it was late at night, and he told him to come with me because he had some business to do. So we went into the place where his land merged into the forest, and he started to howl and yowl, which didn't surprise me because I've seen Rolling Thunder do a number of interesting things. And in this instance, however, a pack of coyote came out of the woods, and they were howling also. And the leader of the pack walked right up to Rolling Thunder, and it was just a few feet away from me. Of course, I wasn't terrified or afraid. I knew that Rolling Thunder knew what he was doing, and the two of them howled and yelped back and forth at each other, and then the coyote led his pack back into the woods. I said, "RT, what was that all about?" He said, "Well, we have to renew our contract." I told the coyote that we wouldn't let any of our people shoot their coyote pack if they wouldn't eat any of the chickens in our chicken coop. And, you know, I've talked with many people who lived on his land, and never once did they say that the coyotes had broken into the chicken coop and gobbled up chicken. Never once. Even though that was common practice in Nevada. They had to be on their guard against coyotes. So that was the promise that Rolling Thunder and the coyotes made to each other, and I actually saw them renew it.
Wow.
He also seemed to be somewhat of a prophet too. I believe in the book it's said he left California or a certain part of California right before the big quake.
Oh, good heavens, yes. And again, I was part of that. I went down to one of his birthday parties in Santa Cruz, and we had a great time. We had buffalo meat. We had succotash. We had drumming and singing. It was a great birthday party. And then a few days after that, he told his host, you know, I've got to get out of here. Something really bad is going to happen to Santa Cruz. So Rolling Thunder and his friends got into the van and drove back to Nevada. And sure enough, the Loma Prieta earthquake hit Santa Cruz, creating devastation to the very area where Rolling Thunder had been living. And so, again, that's an instance where he knew when to get out and get moving.
And then he was also quoted as talking about the Vikings and the Asians both coming to North America before Columbus. And it's kind of funny because I think I remember reading a story in Discover magazine a little while back about them actually finding artifacts that might lend to the fact that the Chinese or some sort of Oriental culture was here first.
I've read a great deal about this. I think it's pretty well verified that the Vikings came to America to what today is America, before Columbus did. Fewer people know about the Chinese, and there was a Chinese expedition that actually came to what today is California and actually sailed down much of the Pacific coast, leaving artifacts behind, talking to people, taking notes, examining the vegetation, the animals, etc. And then they left. Now, you know, this was an interesting way of doing things. The Europeans came, and they came to conquer. They were going to take that land and possess it for Spain, for Portugal, to England, for the Netherlands, for France, whatever. The Chinese did things in a very different way. They came as visitors, as neighbors. They came to learn. I wish that the Chinese would have stayed a little longer and would have prevented the Europeans from creating the devastation that they did. You know, the Europeans, inadvertently, it wasn't their conscious desire, but they brought disease. It was the biggest mass extinction of human beings in North America. Maybe as many as 10 million Native Americans were killed from smallpox, from measles, from whooping cough and other diseases because the Native Americans couldn't produce the antibodies. Now, the Chinese didn't have that much of a problem because they were much closer in ancestry to the Native Americans. because of the crossover on the Bering Straits that happened, thousands of years ago, and probably, in addition to that crossover, boats that made the trip to the Americas, even maybe as far as South America. And so you didn't have the death by microorganisms as a result of the Asian infusion, as you certainly did on behalf of the European invasion.
Is there much similarity between shamanism and some ancient Chinese medicine? Is there like a link there at all?
Ancient Chinese medicine actually originated in shamanism, from Taoist shamanism and from Bon shamanism, both. And so you could say that the roots are there in shamanism. And it's especially true of Taoist shamanism. And one of the foremost teachers of Taoism and Taoist practices is Kenneth Cohen, who wrote a nice little blurb for our book saying that Rolling Thunder was the most traditional Indian medicine man that he had ever met. Well, Kenneth Cohen actually taught Tai Chi and Qigong and Taoist practices and Taoist shamanism at Rolling Thunder's camp, because Rolling Thunder felt that the Taoists were very, very similar in their philosophy and their practice to Native Americans. Rolling Thunder was very careful in terms of who he would let teach, because he didn't want a lot of authoritarian religions to come in and, shall we say, pollute the atmosphere of his camp. But he felt that the Taoists were very close to nature, very open-minded, and had some good health practices, and so that's why he let the Taoism classes go on when Kenneth Cohen came to visit.
The other thing I wanted to ask about Rolling Thunder was he seemed to be on the cutting edge a little bit of some nutritional stuff. Like apparently he was against white flour and sugar there for a little bit. And it's funny how now, now that's really gaining ground in our culture, and people are going on all these, diets, like basically anything white is bad.
Oh, you bet. Rolling Thunder was actually a victim of sugar, and he got diabetes from too much sugar. So he found out too late. But in the book, he really comes out against people taking too much sugar, because he pointed out how it could lead to diabetes. And it did in his case, because in the book we tell the story about how Mickey Hart and I went up to actually save Rolling Thunder's life. He was dying from gangrene in his leg, and it was connected to the diabetes, which has been untreated.
Wow.
And it was a very, very sad trip. And at first he was not going to go with us, because he was just going to stay at his place and die there. And we had to talk him into getting into Mickey Hart's plane, which he had borrowed from Bill Graham, the rock impresario, and get him back to California, where they did an emergency operation and cut off his leg, but saved his life and gave him many, many happy years as a result of that visit. So he said, don't eat too much white sugar, or the same thing will happen to you that happened to me. And, of course, he was very much in favor of eating a lot of vegetables, a lot of fruit, and he was not a vegetarian. He said, if you're going to be a vegetarian, make sure you get enough protein, eat rice and beans. And, of course, when he would eat meat, he would give blessings to the animals, because he said that the animals are part of our relations, and we have to treat them in honor, even when they eat their flesh. And so he had a special prayer to honor animals and chickens and other birds and even sea creatures that had given their lives to nurture human beings. But that's part of the unity of nature that Rolling Thunder was always talking about.
Yeah. So, Stanley, you've had quite a few experiences yourself of all these things. I mean, I know that I thought I heard you say in an interview that you were not fully convinced of the afterlife, or our soul sort of surviving after physical death. But then I also, in your book, you talked about hearing Spotted Fawn's words the day she died.
Oh, that was very, very poignant. Rolling Thunder's wife, Spotted Fawn, was a very good friend of mine. She was a wonderful human being. She really held the community together when Rolling Thunder was gone. And she developed cancer, and Native Americans got free medical treatment at the Presidio Army Hospital in San Francisco. And I would go down several times a week, and I'd do hypnosis to help alleviate the pain. And so at least you could have a peaceful death.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to Mexico for a conference, and when I was in Mexico, I had a very unusual dream of Rolling Thunder in his truck driving back to Nevada from California. And I said, RT, why are you leaving? Why are you leaving? And he turned his head, and I looked in the back, and there was a coffin. I knew that was the coffin of his wife, Spotted Fawn. And then the next night, I woke up suddenly, and there was this voice of Spotted Fawn saying, I came to say goodbye. I'm not going to see you on this earth again. And that was the very night that Spotted Fawn died.
Wow. So does that not convince you?
So all that I can say is that's pretty good evidence.
Yeah.
Well, you were asking me about John Kennedy's assassination.
Yeah.
And that ties in a little bit with the book because Rolling Thunder had a great admiration for Senator Ted Kennedy, who had done a lot on behalf of the Indians. And he had very little respect for most U.S. politicians. But Ted Kennedy was one person who had really drafted some legislation that was extremely helpful. But years before that time, I did have a unusual experience with psilocybin, which is a substance very similar to LSD. I took it in a legal experiment, and I had a very exciting time with a lot of visual images, a lot of musical accompaniment, a lot of scenes from my own life, a lot of insights into the workings of the universe. And then I had this very, very tragic image of Abraham Lincoln, who was in silhouette with his head bowed and a gun at the base of his head, and somebody shouting out the president had been shot. And then Lincoln's face morphed into that of Kennedy. And again, there was a rifle, and somebody was saying the president has been shot. And sure enough, a few months later, Kennedy was dead.
Wow.
So you can call that what you want. It might have been coincidence. It might have been precognition, but it's sad to say it came true.
Yeah.
One thing I'd been meaning to ask you is, do you think that the placebo effect lends more to the idea of consciousness being something generated by the brain, or the brain simply being some sort of a conduit? The ability for the consciousness to be tricked into healing the body?
Well, you can make a case either way. All I can say is there is now a whole different paradigm about consciousness, holding that consciousness is the basis of all existence, and that the brain is basically a conduit for consciousness. It shapes and forms consciousness according to that individual's personality, hopes, and desires. And, of course, this is not in accordance with mainstream science, but it's an interesting point of view, and several worthwhile books are coming out on it. And, again, that would explain the parapsychological phenomena that we've been talking about. There is this unity, and it's very much in consort with Native American way of thinking. So to get back to the question at hand, the placebo effect actually goes back to Native American shamans and shamans from other parts of the world in a very interesting way. Just think back 50, 60, even more years ago, maybe 100,000 years ago, maybe even further, 200,000 years ago, when early humans got sick, and there was somebody in the clan or in the tribe who wanted to make them well. And maybe they would pray to the saints or spirits, or maybe they would give them herbs that were completely worthless. But if the person believed in it and believed in the prayers, they would get well more often than not. Well, today we call that the placebo effect. What if somebody didn't believe in it and said, oh, that's nonsense, these mushrooms that you're giving me, these seeds that you're giving me aren't any good? Well, those persons, by and large, died. And when they died, their genes dropped out of the gene pool and they didn't have descendants. So over the years, the people who responded to placebo had children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, who also manifested the placebo effect. And so this aided human survival. So today, placebo is so strong that it probably accounts for at least 40% of the effectiveness of any medicinal drug that's given, and sometimes as much as 50 or 60%. In fact, you can even give a placebo instead of giving a medication, and more often than not, the person will get well because of the power of belief and suggestion, hope, and faith. This important trait, the trait of what we call suggestibility, is something that goes back to shamanic treatment at the dawn of history.
So it's almost like if you can believe you're healthy, if you can honestly convince yourself you're healthy. So like, I believe I heard a story, you tell a story before about actually being able to destroy a wart just by concentrating every day on cutting off its blood supply mentally.
Oh, good heavens, yes, there's a whole literature on this. Hypnosis can get rid of warts, self-suggestion can get rid of warts, imagination can get rid of warts. And you're right, it cuts off the blood supply to the wart, and the wart shrivels up and dies. It doesn't do this 100% of the time, but it does this more often than you'd expect if the wart had not been treated at all. One of the first studies along this line was done by Monty Ullman, who I worked with back at Maimonides Medical Center doing the dream telepathy research. And I think that's pretty well established now, the power of suggestion in terms of wart removal. Now you take that a little further, and imagination and suggestion can help people to heal themselves of a number of different ailments. Of course, you also want to take advantage of the best that medical care can give you, especially enlightened medical care that doesn't overdrug or overdose or over surgicalize a person. But self-healing can be a very, very important part of this project, in this prospect.
Yeah, I've actually heard stories before of people who had recovered from cancer and had actually mentioned they had devoted time each day to concentrate and focus on killing, like actually watching cancer cells in their body disintegrate.
Well, you see, that goes back to Native Americans. They don't see a distinction between mind, body, and spirit. In the West, of course, we do. In fact, we deny spirit, and then we divide the mind from the body. And one of my colleagues has, again, written a lot about shamanism, Jean Achterberg, did an experiment some years ago where she had a group of people focus on their cancer cells, actually draw pictures of their cancer cells, and also draw pictures of the immune system. And the people that drew pictures of their cancer cells as being very weak, like mud and slime, and the immune system as being very robust, like rocket ships and white knights and warriors, they're the people who survived. The people who thought of the white blood corpuscles as clouds or as mist, and the cancers being crabs or shellfish or rocks, they're the people who died. And so, again, a person's imagination can be self-suggestion and can be very vital in terms of maintaining health and also in terms of curing disease in one way or another.
That is fascinating. I have one question before I forget. Stanley, would you, if you had to go back, or if you could go back and redo anything, especially in regards to your book, The Voice of Rolling Thunder, would you change anything or do anything differently?
Oh, I certainly would. We made a very bad mistake in The Voice of Rolling Thunder. That's why I want to sell as many copies as I can so that we the mistake. We talk about the shaking tents. Now, Rolling Thunder didn't do the shaking tent ceremony, but other Native Americans have.
Right.
And in the shaking tent ceremony, you bind up the shaman and put the shaman in the tent, and the tent starts to shake. And you know the shaman can't shake the tent because the shaman has been bound. Now, of course, a good magician could do the same thing, so I'm not claiming a great deal from this, except it's been done and observed for a couple of hundred years. And in the book, we talk about the shaking tent ceremony, but we say that at the end of the ceremony, the shaman is unbound. The cords are loose, and they're not. At the end of the ceremony, the shaman is still bound. We've got to go back and change that one word to make it accurate, and I'm aggravated that I didn't catch that before the book came out.
Oh, jeez. You're being pretty hard on yourself, Stanley. That's not too bad at all.
Well, you know, we introduce people to a lot about Native American history, Native American customs, and so it's even much more than the story about Rolling Thunder. We bring in a lot that the reader probably is not going to be exposed to one way or another in their ordinary reading.
Yeah, it was a fascinating read, Stanley. I really liked it. I'm going to read some of it over again for sure, especially the shamanic healing and the Sweat Lodge chapter. I just did a Sweat Lodge on Sunday, kind of in celebration of interviewing with you. It was just me and the medicine woman. So
that is just remarkable. It really is, because the Sweat Lodge was a very commonly used healing practice. And just think of it, you sweat the impurities out of your body, you're with a group of people who give you social support, and then there's usually some drumming before and afterwards. It has a lot of things going for it.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
And I'm so glad to hear that you have been a participant of it.
Yeah, I'm going to bring Darren with me next time, I think.
Okay, good for you.
So, I thought I heard a rumor about maybe a documentary, about your life. Is that true, or?
Oh, good heavens. People have filmed so many aspects of my life, and they've done so many interviews, and so if they can ever get the money together to edit it properly, there might be a documentary. I just hope I'm still alive when it comes to pass. But I don't have anything to do with that. That's a project that Saybrook University is involved with, and if people want to donate a few dollars, they just send a check to Saybrook University, and they can get the address off my website, which is stanleykrippner.weebly, WEBLY.com. And of course, Saybrook is in San Francisco, California. Sure.
Yeah, we'll make sure we put a link to that in the show notes so people can click right over.
And then how could people buy your book? What's the best way for them to buy your book?
They can buy the book from Amazon.com. They can get it from my website. They can get it from their local bookstore. If people are in the Bay Area, I'm doing several book signings in the next couple of months, and all of that is on my website. They can look for it there. And if they can't buy the book any other way, it's only $20. They can write out a check and send it to me, and I will personally autograph and send off a copy to them.
That's great.
That's great. Yeah, I recommend that people go out and get it, because it was a great read and a good look into a culture that a lot of people don't see.
Yes, that's one thing I like about the book, because we have given a big chunk of the book to a description of Native American culture. And of course, when the Europeans arrived, there were over 500 Native American cultures in what today is the United States. And they were very, very different in many, many ways. Rolling Thunder didn't only study Cherokee healing and Shoshone healing. Those were his identifications. He studied 4 other types of Native American healing also, so that he'd be prepared for just about anything.
Yeah, he was truly intertribal in that way. Is that what you call it?
Was.
Yeah.
Yes, intertribal.
Yeah. Was it Rolling Thunder who gave you your Indian name?
No, I got my Indian name from Dr. Edward Richardson. He was the first clinical psychologist who was Native American and got a Ph.D. in clinical psychology. Wonderful man. He died just as the book was coming out, and his widow was so happy that he knew that the book was coming out. And of course, I had known him for actually longer than I'd known Rolling Thunder. We go way, way, way back, and he had done a lot to advance Native American causes and Native American rights, and to encourage Native American boys and girls to go to school and to go to graduate school and to play a part in controlling their own destiny.
So, as I understand it, you're also the godfather of the Grateful Dead caucus?
Well, the Grateful Dead Caucus is a group of scholars, people in academic institutions and universities, who gather once a year and give very, very scholarly papers on the Grateful Dead. And they've called me the Godfather because I'm the first one who took the Grateful Dead seriously in terms of knowing that they had some depth to them, and that the people involved in the Grateful Dead were very intelligent and very knowledgeable in terms of musicology. And so, not knowing it, yes, I kicked off the serious study of Grateful Dead literature. Now there are several books out about the Grateful Dead and about the scholarship.
Well, we'd like to really thank you for coming on, Stanley. I really hope maybe someone can get a Kickstarter going, or somehow someone can put together that documentary, because I'd love to see it.
Well, thank you very much. Maybe one of your listeners will be so inspired to do that. Thank you.
Yeah, you've been absolutely an inspiration to me and to a lot of people. You know, it's just you've got so much experience, and you've just done so many wonderful things. You've been involved in so many different things. I hope a lot of people get to buy your book and learn more about you and Rolling Thunder.
And thank you for a very intelligent interview. You've asked a lot of good questions.
Was our interview with Dr. Stanley Krippner from Saybrook University in San Francisco. Just an absolutely fascinating guy. Blew my fucking mind again.
Yeah, he's been into so much stuff. I had so many questions for him, and the whole shamanism thing, and he's just involved in so much. I mean, when I look back at his his Wikipedia page, he's co-authored something like 20 books and co-edited a bunch of them, like everything from dream research to shamanism to consciousness, and he's still a very healthy skeptical guy, right?
Yeah, and I think the guy's 80 years old.
Yeah.
And he's still a
whippersnapper.
Yeah, he's still like sharp as a tack.
Yeah. Yeah.
So hopefully he's got a few more books in him. That's for sure. But thanks again, Stanley, for coming on. And again, big thanks to RPJ for coming on for the intro there. We'll have him back in a couple of weeks as well.
Yeah. And what do we got coming up?
Next we got, actually, we're recording this on Tuesday, and tomorrow we're going on the Nat and Marie show. It's a podcast. I think it's out of Toronto, Canada. They've asked us to come on and be panelists, so you guys can look out for that. It's Nat and Marie show. You can find it on in iTunes, of course, and we'll be on the next episode of that. So that's something the listeners can look for.
And then we have a NASA scientist coming up very shortly.
Yeah, Dr. Philip Metzger out of Florida, Kennedy Space Center, I think.
Yeah,
he's a scientist, a physicist, and a planetary scientist, and he's works at the lab. I think he runs the lab. I'm not sure he works there. He works in it for sure. I think he might run it. The space mining technologies department. So his blog's all about mining asteroids, which asteroids to mine. We'll get the next episode. We'll have the links to his blog. It's a really cool blog. People should check it out. But I'm really looking forward to that. We get to talk to an actual NASA scientist, so that'll be exciting.
Yeah, that's going to be great.
Yeah, and then after that we'll have Robbie Graham, of course, of SilverScreenSaucers.com.
Yep. So it's a busy week. We're cramming in a lot of stuff, and we're both really excited about it. You can get a hold of us if you want. My email is graham@grimerica.com. That's GRAHAM @grimerica.com.
Yeah, or feedback at grimerica.ca, or I'm Darren at grimerica.com. And of course, we'll have links to where you can get Stanley Krippner's book, his website, of course, and all that. And I was thinking, hopefully somebody can put a Kickstarter together. Maybe one of our listeners knows how. I don't know how. I'm clueless, but you know how?
No, I don't.
Well,
I know how to donate.
I know.
I'll donate to the Kickstarter.
Yeah, maybe someone can get that going and get in touch with Saybrook University and get some crowdsourcing going on this. Or of course, as Stanley said, you can make a donation through the university. So we'll link to that as well in the show notes. Alrighty.
Well, thanks a lot, Darren. That was great.
Okay, and of course we'll have links to all the music you heard in this episode as well. And we'll see you when we see you.
Ciao, man.